Okay, I wasn't expecting to be the only female speaker over here. I believe the other lady who was supposed to speak dropped out at the last minute. It's okay, it's a good thing to stand out. I was just, earlier at the table, there was a gentleman who was sitting with us, Vijay, who I think fled from our table because I told him that, you know, bureaucrats, politicians, and lawyers are all really fortunate that journalists exist. Because if journalists didn't exist, then bureaucrats, politicians, and lawyers would be the most hated people in the world. Fortunately for all of you, there is us. And however, I'm not going to indulge in only self-flagellation over here. I'm speaking on the subject, entertainment journalism in an age of dumbed-down news. But it's not my aim over here to stand here and just speak ill of the media. However, we are at a crossroads in the media, and introspection never hurt anybody. And I think that it's important for us to understand what changes are taking place in the Indian media and how we as the public also can make sure that we steer the media to stay on the right course instead of being led by sensationalism and a desire for TRPs that compels them to cover news that is not news. Okay, so I have a few questions for all of you. I can't see you very clearly, but just simple questions. Will you just by a show of hands tell me, how many of you wear clothes? That's everybody, isn't it? 100%, okay. How many of you have seen at least one film in your life? That's 100%, okay. How many of you have attended a political rally in your life? Okay, that is a smaller percentage. Am I right? It is a smaller percentage. But the funny thing is that although we all wear clothes, most of us, if we have access to cinema, we watch films, most of us will spend our lives having never attended a political rally. But I remember that 18 years ago, when I started out as a journalist, I was told fashion journalism is not serious journalism. I was told film journalism is not serious journalism. I was told that any kind of coverage of entertainment, the arts and culture and lifestyle is not serious journalism. So I was working in an organization called India Today, and after a few years my byline started appearing in the magazine, and my neighbors were all very proud of me. However, they would kind of hesitantly ask me, so bete, when are you going to start serious journalism? And I'd say, you know, I think that entertainment is very serious. I think lifestyle is very serious. And they'd say, yes, but that's not journalism, right? Now, the question is, I mean, just look at all the ladies that are sitting in this hall, or just look at me. I'm wearing trousers, right? Now, I wear jeans and take it completely for granted. And yet, there are generations of women before us who did not have the privilege of being able to choose whatever they want to wear and decide that trousers are practical for certain situations, saris are okay for other situations, and the ball gown is okay for other situations. I am not very comfortable wearing a sari. If I had worn a sari to this talk, I probably would have fallen off over here, right? So I get the privilege of wearing trousers when I choose to. These trousers, in a sense, actually are a feminist statement, right? They are a fashion statement. And yet, we wear these trousers without thinking twice about the journey that has gone into bringing us to a position where we, as women, can wear trousers. We don't think twice about it. So, while I'm not speaking ill of political journalism or business journalism or environment journalism, what I say to my students when I teach at the Indian Institute of Mass Communication, and what I'm saying to you now, is that the impact of the things that are covered by journalists who cover entertainment, lifestyle, and culture is felt over a period of time. So if there are elections tomorrow, a new government is formed. The political journalist is covering the elections. The political journalist's coverage of the elections, the influence, the impact is seen the very next day. The new government is formed, right? Whereas the influence of films, the influence of fashion, these are all pervasive, yet we can't really put a finger on it. All of you would be knowing that at the time of independence, there was a move to make Hindi the national language of our country, right? And there were certain states that felt, one particular state, that felt that making Hindi our national language would be an imposition of the language on other states, right? And yet, now, if you go to schools and colleges and you go to the general public and you ask them, what's the national language of India? There are large percentages of people who just assume that Hindi is the national language. Actually, we don't have a constitutionally designated single national language. So why do people assume that Hindi is the national language? Yes, it is spoken by a larger section of our population across more states than other languages. But there is also that other reason, which is Hindi cinema, right? Hindi cinema has been able to do for the Hindi language what no propagandist and no political party could have possibly expected to achieve, right? So here again is the influence of cinema, and yet through the 18, 19 years that I've been a journalist, I am still asked by colleagues why I think, and I'm not joking when I tell you, there are colleagues who've met me for the first time who've actually said to me to my face, oh God, you're intelligent. This is, I'm serious, I'm not kidding. They actually, and of course they later go on to become friends, but they're actually surprised because you're someone who's covering cinema, you're someone who's covering fashion, you're someone who's covering the arts, so they're surprised. Okay, the other example that I'd like to give is something that I have been personally very influenced by, which is how many of you know about autism? You know about autism, right? You know about the existence of autism. You understand it, okay? Now, the first time I ever heard the word autism was not from a parent of a child with autism. It wasn't because I encountered a person with autism, but it was because I saw a Hollywood film starring Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, which featured a major character with autism. Again, this was not a bunch of parents walking down the streets, holding placards, drawing our attention to autism. This was a film, right? And this film was able to do for autism what thousands of rallies by parents would not have been able to achieve. Again, this is cinema, right? So the influence of cinema, the arts, lifestyle, culture, whatever you may call it, it is in all our lives. We don't particularly see it. Sometimes it's hard to put a finger on it, but it's there. Having said that, my talk is not about the positives or the importance or the significance of entertainment journalism. I'm here to talk to you about entertainment journalism in an age of dumbed down news. And when I say dumbed down news, I don't think I need to explain it to you because, as I said, we journalists are among the most hated people in this country. And while everyone here is a consumer of news, I also know that one of the most hated television anchors in my circle of friends is also somebody that every single one of them watches. So we as the public, while we as the media, of course, have a responsibility. I'm not naming the anchor. We as the public, we as the media, we have a responsibility, but it's important to understand that while the media has a responsibility, it's very easy to point fingers and say they need to fix themselves. When you watch a news show which you despise and don't respect, and you persist in watching it, and you sit there and you say, I hate the way this person shouts, and this person is doing this only for TRPs. Do you understand that you are the TRP? If you weren't watching, and nobody else was watching, and there was no consumer of that news, then that person would not get TRPs, and then perhaps that person's bosses, or perhaps that person is his or her own boss. As you can see, I'm being very careful. I'm saying his or her, so you don't know whom I'm talking about. But then maybe an entire channel or an entire news group would decide to change their policy, right? Does this mean that that news group doesn't have any responsibility? Obviously not. But what I'm saying is that the public also has a responsibility, and a lot of the time, as members of the public, we don't understand how much we are contributing to the decline in the standards of the media. There are two recent cases that I would like to cite. One is, all of you know Vayala Ravi? Okay, at least some of you do, okay. He's our Minister for Overseas Affairs. Now, this is a news report. I don't know if it was carried in all the newspapers over here, but Mr. Vailar Ravi was recently accused of making a sexist remark to a female journalist, all right? Now, the problem with that accusation is, everybody made that accusation. They all said he made a sexist remark to a female journalist. The problem was, this man was speaking in Malayalam. Most of the journalists who were reporting what he had said don't understand Malayalam. Now, most of the time, in most other instances, I would have been dependent also on a journalist who knows the language. I would trust that journalist to give me an accurate translation of what the man said and just hope that he or she is speaking the truth and go along with it. As it happens, I'm a Malayali. I understand Malayalam. So, according to many of our news reports, apparently, Mr. Vailar Ravi was being questioned by a journalist in Kerala who was speaking in Malayalam, and he was being questioned about Mr. P.J. Kurian and his role in the Suryanelli case, which you're aware of, right? The Suryanelli rape case. Now, Mr. Vailar Ravi he lost his cool while he was being asked all these questions, and at some point he turned to this journalist and he said, I think you have a problem with P.J. Kurian. I think you've had a problem with him in the past. And he walked away. Now, this is what the man said. I think you've had a problem with P.J. Kurian in the past. Now, I am not in love with politicians, believe me, okay? I'm the last person in the world who would want to sit and defend a politician. If I got an opportunity, like every Indian, I would bash up a politician. But having said that, every comment made by a man to a woman is not a sexist comment. This comment that he made to this girl could well have been made to another man, right? It could have been made to a male reporter also. And what did our news channels do? They translated it incorrectly to show that Mr. Vailar Ravi had said to that female reporter, I think you've had a similar problem with Mr. P.J. Kurian in the past. Now look at what he said. I think you've had a problem with Mr. P.J. Kurian in the past. Look at what they translated into. I think you've had a similar problem with Mr. P.J. Kurian in the past. Now there's a difference because basically with the translation they've given, what they're saying is that Mr. Vailar Ravi said to her, I think you've also probably had some kind of issue with, maybe you think that he raped you, maybe you made some kind of an allegation, maybe he molested you. That's a highly offensive comment, right, to make to a female reporter. But what if the man didn't say it? And yet, you know, I was watching this on the news and sitting there and thinking, why is every news channel claiming he said this? And you know, this had happened a few days before Valentine's Day, but they carried it on Valentine's Day. I can only guess. I swear, I can only guess that they had all thought on Valentine's Day there would be protests by people against Valentine's Day, and they had all assigned reporters to cover these protests that they thought would happen. Protests did not happen at the scale that they were expecting. How do you fill the bulletin? Hey, somebody writes to you and says, somebody calls you up and says, you know, Mr. Vailar Ravi has said this, and reporters in Kerala are angry. Let's carry this report. Don't authenticate, don't be, you know, don't check, don't go and ask the man. You know what ultimately happened? Mr. Ravi also apologized. He apologized for a remark he never made, okay? Now, was what he said to that girl okay? No. You know, as a politician, it's your job to keep your cool when you're addressing the media. But did he say what the media claimed he did? Obviously not. So as the media, we obviously have a huge responsibility. But when you are an entertainment journalist, you are already in a field where you're being told that this is not serious journalism, okay? Now, we live in an era where the social media hysteria drives news. Sensationalism and the need for it drives news, which is what we saw with Mr. Vailar Ravi's case. There is no, people don't make an effort to verify news because of the need for speed. The first person to be on air is the person who can say breaking news only on my channel. So you might recall that Mr. Mohan Bhagwat of the RSS was accused of saying that it is the role of women, it is the role of a woman to take care of the house and the role of a man to go out and earn money. When actually the soundbite from his speech had been edited mischievously, and he wasn't saying this is my opinion. He was saying this is what happens in marriages in America. okay? Now, I'm not saying that that is what happens in marriages in America, but there's a difference between saying that Mohan Bhagwat said this is the role of men and women in a marriage, and saying Mr. Mohan Bhagwat said this is what happens in marriages in America. But what happened was that a news agency had incorrectly edited the soundbite, sent it to a lot of news channels. Now, because right now everyone in our country has discovered women's rights. It's as though before the December 16th gang rape, there were no crimes against women in our country. If you watch the media, you would think that. If you read the social media, you would think that. But because the media wants to maintain this momentum with their coverage of women's rights and violence against women, they grab this news and they put it on air. Shortly afterwards, everybody had egg on their faces. What also happened was that Mr. Mohan Bhagwat had made some other offensive comments. He said that crimes against, rape and things like that happen more in urban India than in rural India, and he did say that, okay, he did say that. However, this false reportage of his comments about marriage and the role of men and women in marriage gave the Sangh Parivar an excuse to say the media was misquoting him in the other instance too. But when you're covering entertainment journalism, you're being told, listen, it doesn't matter if you're sensationalist, you don't have to be responsible. And in any case, you're coming from a place when it all started out with yellow film magazines, gossip magazines. When I started out, entertainment journalism meant the sensationalist film magazines in Bombay. Then in the 1990s, you had the color supplements of newspapers coming in, which have gone to the extent of actually some of them selling space to cover films. And they've openly set up departments in their newspapers to sell space to cover films. And on top of that, there's this whole social media hysteria, which is leading not just political and business coverage, but also entertainment coverage. So what do you do as a journalist if you want to be an entertainment journalist who has something intelligent to say to the public and who wants to explain to the public the reason why Hindi is so widely spoken in this country, the reason why I'm standing here wearing trousers, and the reason why I first heard the word autism? Well, it's a lonely battle, right? And many of you are management students, you will be innovators in the future. The fact is that, like in my profession, for innovators in most other professions, it starts off as a lonely battle and seemingly a very, very large battle. But like we saw at that TED speech that was just played out to us, you just have to have the courage to stand there and make an ass of yourself until you get that first follower who proves to the world that you're not a lone nut, right? And once you get that one other journalist who agrees with your concept of entertainment journalism, and then another, and then another, then there are people who are looking at the rest of the entertainment journalists in this country and think, why can't they be like them, right? So it's all about challenging convention, which is the theme of this particular TEDx conference. We live in difficult times. We live in times when the media is led by hysteria and sensationalism, but there is also a great deal of space that is given to responsible investigative journalism, and there is much that the Indian media has also achieved in the kind of justice that they've been able to bring to people who might not have otherwise got justice if it wasn't for the media spotlight. So, as journalists, we need to understand our responsibility, and I would beg you, as a journalist who wants the audience to understand this too, I would beg you to consider your responsibilities also as a member of the public. And if you find yourself watching a television show that you are abusing, then I would request you to switch that channel and move to another one that you respect. Thank you so much.